Hello and welcome to another session of the GC MasterClass Series by ContractPodAi. I am Charles Dimov. I am the Vice President of Global Marketing here at ContractPodAi, and with me today I have Matt Gould. Matt, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Charles. I am the General Counsel here at ContractPod, and I also look after the legal transformation team. So it's my team that help to work with clients to install their solution in order to deliver them the product that they want in order to be able to make full use of the capabilities.
And Matt, you are also the General Counsel for ContractPodAi, aside from managing the implementation team, a lot that you're actually kind of running with at the moment. Now, before you were with ContractPodAi, you were a GC at a couple of other places. Could you just share with the audience a little bit about that too?
Yeah, sure. So I was the General Counsel for the EMEA region for Telstra for 15 years. More recently, I spent a short time with Leica Mobile as their General Counsel. So my background is very much in telco, but obviously done a lot of IT work, a lot of M&A, and obviously been heavily involved, certainly from the early part of my career, working with sales teams in terms of actually helping them to sell product. So I come very much back from how lawyers get involved with the business, how we actually and help the business to deliver value. I trained in private practice, so I have that knowledge from how a lawyer works, obviously in private practice, and then in-house as well. So I think one of the reasons why this opportunity at ContractPod suited me, and I think why it's very interesting, is that ContractPod has always been interested in having lawyers work with lawyers. Our technology is about obviously legal technology, having lawyers involved in that, because we understand the pain points. I understand the pain points I had from running a global legal team, and how you do workflows, how you do approvals, how you get the systems done, and the importance of having contracts and information at your fingertips, and how you can actually use technology in order to facilitate a great experience.
That's fantastic, and it's great to have you on board, and certainly wonderful to have that type of experience, that it's not just about somebody who has been from the IT side or the technology side who's doing an implementation, but managing the team. You actually know the pains that sometimes the GC goes through, and some of the anxieties and the background that a GC is kind of coming at this from, and even some of that mindset. So again, wonderful to have you on board. And again, I think that really helps out a lot with our customers, that it's not just a cold technical function, but it's like you're bringing some of that, understanding with you.
And I think you're right, Charles, because one of the things that I try and do with my team, obviously some of my team are lawyers, particularly on the AI and on the legal engineering side, but also a lot of my team are project managers. But helping those project managers to think, what is the problem? What is it that the lawyers are trying to solve? And quite often lawyers are not necessarily technologists, so they know what it is that they want to achieve, but trying to articulate the problem and trying to put that into language that we can understand. And so how I work with my team is trying to help them understand what it is that the lawyers are trying to achieve, why they're trying to achieve that, and so therefore that's what the focus should be.
Yeah, and I'm sure that customers actually appreciate that background. You and your team have probably seen a lot of different really interesting things. What's the most weird place? Is there any weird place that you've actually encountered where contracts have been? Because one of the jobs of your team is actually kind of go out to a company and assess where are these contracts? Are they physical? Are they on a thumb drive? Are they on your computer? Are they on the network drive? Or where, right? Any funny story from that perspective?
Well, I think you've touched it. I mean, I think what has slightly surprised me when we've been talking to prospective clients and also to clients in life is there's almost a slight embarrassment sometimes, because GCs don't necessarily even know the answer to that question. They know that there is a main contract repository, of course, but do they actually know, is stuff really still sitting in a salesman's briefcase? Where actually are some of the, particularly if you've had a contract with a client or that's been rolling for a number of years, really, where is it? Has it actually been stored in the right place? And certainly when you have, for example, if you've done an acquisition and you've maybe a large corporation has bought a smaller company, quite where their information is stored, who knows? And actually, if you haven't, if the parent company or the acquiring company doesn't have their own great systems anyway, trying to sort themselves out. So we've been able to help, and it's one of those things that GCs know they should do all the time, but it can be a bit of a pain, and it's one of those things that I think that people are becoming much more wise to now, that GCs understand that they need to have that information in one place. Right. And of course the technology exists now in a way that it didn't 5-10 years ago, to make that actually very easy now to have it in one place. Now it can be searchable. Now there's other things you can do with it. It doesn't matter whether it's in Word or in PDF or whatever. But and so I'm not sure I've got a funny story on that, but it does sometimes surprise me just how even almost household name organizations are not necessarily as cognizant of where their information is stored as perhaps one might like to think.
Really key point. And actually, it's fun. The funny part that I took out of your story was basically just saying that a lot of GCs are a bit embarrassed to even admit that they're not really sure where all the contracts are, or they can't confirm for sure that yes, 100% of the contracts are right here, because we may or may not be. So moving on, you're responsible for the implementation team. And you get to see a lot of different companies and how they're reacting to the current crisis, for example, because we are currently, as we're speaking, in the pandemic, we're in wave 2 or wave 3, depending on where you are in the world. In the legal market, what's the impact of the pandemic on the perception of digital transformation in legal on legal teams? Yeah,
I think it is. I think moving to legal technology is something that organizations have been looking at for a long time. But I think that this has fast-tracked a number of organizations to think about how they can do things more efficiently and more easily. I mean, we've now got the technology, we've got cloud-based services in a way which facilitates working from home. So at the end of the day, if you have a good storage system, if your IT systems are good, you know where it is, it actually just makes people's lives easier. And when you have automated workflows that are all in one place, it just means that it doesn't really matter where people are in the world. I think there was an issue. I think historically some of the workflow tools have not necessarily been as easy to use as perhaps they might be. I think that the more recent generation of workflow tools, for example, are just better. They're more experienced, they're more intuitive, they're easier to use, and as a result of which people can work from anywhere to get things done. And in the past, I think people relied on the fact that because maybe the majority of the team might be in the office, even if there were some people working from home, therefore if you needed to sign off, there would be you'd just email a colleague and get them to get the sign off. Now, because
don't chase Joe down, find him.
Exactly, because the execs aren't in the office either. Actually, you have to have a better process. And doing everything by email, as a lot of organizations do in terms of getting approvals, what have you, where it's fine. In the past, it was okay because that would have been maybe a small percentage. Now everybody's doing it all the time, and people are realizing actually that's not a good way to record an approval, to record a flow of information or a decision-making process, that there are better ways to do that. And might as well use the technology. And I think people are reflecting on that more because they're working from home collectively in a way that maybe people didn't reflect on that or didn't necessarily prioritize that prior to the pandemic. So I think people are taking this opportunity to fast forward, and it's a transformation that was needed to happen in terms of way of working anyway. But I think we've all seen, just in terms of general technology, it's easier to work from home with Zoom and Teams, whatever, in a way that it wasn't a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I think we're realizing that you want that flexibility, but you need to know where your documents are, you need to know your storage are, and actually that just makes the whole business work more efficiently anyway.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I don't expect that it's going to be a go back to the office and business as usual. I think business as usual will have changed after this whole experience. So you're right.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for example, when I was working at Telstra, we moved from a culture where this was 5-6 years ago, but where everybody was expected to be in the office generally, unless there was a good reason not to be in the office, to a shift in culture where we moved to true hot desking. People could work more flexibly, and that was also about it was a business decision, but it was driven by the lawyers initially, in fact, in Telstra, because it was about being able to want lawyers who, for example, had care and responsibilities, wanted to do job sharing, and actually create that kind of environment that people could work in a more flexible way to reflect the modern world. And some organizations were going there. The technology wasn't necessarily always good enough to make that easy, but now technology is coming on to encourage that. And I think lawyers are professional people. They want that flexibility. If you're working in a global organization, you could easily be working very early in the morning or very late at night, but then you still got to pick the kids up from school, and you just bounce around, and then you go to the office for a few hours. And I think that's the new way. It's the new way of the world. And I think what the pandemic is changing is that whilst maybe some large companies had already making strides in that direction, we're now seeing that at sort of the mid-market kind of companies as well, and even smaller businesses as well. And of course, with the cost of real estate, those small businesses, maybe you don't need people in the office. ContractPod is a great example. We've got people all around the world, and you're in Canada today. I'm in London. I was talking to a member of my team just before this call who was in India, and I'm about to get on a call with one of our sales guys in the US. So we're a global organization, and it's changing the way of working, but the legal technology needs to move with that globalization. And again, if you're running a legal team now, like I was in Telstra, you get to a point where it doesn't matter necessarily so much where the lawyer is based. So you can have the best person for the role, but are they based in the same? You don't necessarily want everyone to be based in London or everyone based in Toronto. You can have people dotted around, and that way you can do a much more efficient 24/7 kind of working. But therefore, everybody needs to be able to see the documentation. You need to be able to see the red lines. You need to be able to collaborate with people in different geographies, and then someone else can take over. And if you're doing a big M&A kind of transaction, then you want someone else, a lawyer, who can then take over in their time zone and then complete things on. And I think the modern tools allow that to happen. I was using our collaboration tool yesterday, and again, it really does allow you to hand a project over in real time to someone else, and then when you go back to it the following morning, and this is just within an internal group, to see what's happened. Whereas if you've been emailing and redlining a document, and then someone had redlined it and emailed it back to you, and the version control becomes very, very hard. And this is before we've even got to a point where you can send it to a client. Now, if it's all in one place, you can see who's been working on it, you can see what they've done, and then you can then pick it up, and then you can tidy the document up. So these tools just facilitate that way of working in a much easier way and less stressful way than people have been working in the past.
Yeah, and I think that I know legal has been often accused of being a little bit maybe not slightly technophobic, not really willing to kind of adapt with the times at times. I mean, we've heard that at conferences time and time again, not just by lay people, but a lot of the legal professionals, the attorneys, the lawyers, the GCs standing up and openly stating that. So yeah, it's kind of, I think, if anything, I mean, maybe this has been, I think we've stated it sometimes, a number of times, that there is an opportunity coming out of this crisis. What do you think is one of the greatest limiting factors that in-house attorneys deal with today? And what could help them out the most, in your opinion?
It's low value work. What can often happen, and I've seen this so many times, is it's the low value work that clogs up the system. Because when you want a small change to a pretty standard form contract, but it's being emailed to an attorney, salesman just sends it to the attorney they tend to like rather than anything else, at which point you don't know how busy that individual is or even whether they're on holiday. And actually, it could be a very minor change.
Yes.
That actually doesn't really, but by the time the attorney's got to it, it's clogging something up, or they're having to deal with it out of hours or late at night just to sort of keep the world moving. If you can actually get rid of that low value work, take the drudge out of the system, because a lot of that is perfectly capable of being automated, at which point if it was done properly in the first place with a playbook or an automated template, then it probably would never need to trouble the attorney at all.
Good point, yeah.
At which point you can actually just take it away. Or if it did need an attorney to have a look at it, at least it's being very, very crystallized. If you're using a contract triage tool, it's actually getting to the right attorney. For example, if you have a team of lawyers who deal with a certain kind of project, then it doesn't really matter, because it can just go into that team, but then it can be managed, and whoever gets the first piece of availability can then actually look at what they need to do, if they which could be a team in India, for example, or an outsourced team, or a contract management team, in order that you can actually empower other people in an organization in order to keep the wheels flowing. So you're not taking the time away from the attorneys who are there doing the more complex works, writing the playbooks, writing the risk analysis, or actually negotiating the sort of the high value contracts, which are very bespoke, and the crown jewels, and actually you want them to be able to focus on those bigger, higher value pieces of work and not clogging the system up. And if you can, I remember, trying to get sign-offs, for example, even pretty senior attorneys trying to persuade find a director who can give a sign-off on something or get an approval, and it just takes too much time, where actually that shouldn't necessarily be the attorney's job, but that it needs to get done. If you have an automated workflow approval process, actually a lot of that can just happen very, very seamlessly, very simply, and you're not taking the attorney's time up, which you can be more efficient as an organization, but you're giving value back and time back to the individual, which I think in this day and age is very important as well.
That's a really, really good point. Exactly. And in effect, it's almost kind of delivering on that idea that way your attorneys and your GC and everybody from that legal aspect isn't focused on the mundane tasks. They're actually focusing, now it frees up their time to go focus on more strategic things which have a higher business value, which is exactly what you want. So let's focus for a moment on the implementation of new technology, and you're an expert at that because you run the implementation team here. So regarding that in legal teams, your team focuses on exactly this, and you see many legal technology system deployments. Now, Matt, if you were speaking to GC and you're about to give them a little bit of advice, thinking about a new legal automation system, what advice would you have for them? And before you start the project, you should really do this. And what is it that you would say?
Well, the first thing is, it is actually that basic thing of getting your house in order. Make sure the housekeeping is done. Actually, do your workflows work? Do the sign-off processes that you have, do they actually work within the business? Do all the teams actually have access to the right pieces of information? Are people focusing on the right things? Because automating something that doesn't work very well is still not going to work very efficiently. Yeah. So if you can build your playbooks, build your templates, for example, just doing that internal audit, for example, that is your team in Europe using a very similar methodology for their basic standard sales agreements that your team in North America are using? And has anyone actually ever compared the contracts that different teams in different parts of the world are using, or can you actually simplify? Because because I think a lot of organizations, because they've just grown up in certain ways, and different attorneys like their own different templates, their own styling forms, their own standard forms, that actually doing that homework, doing that audit across the piece. And one of the things that we encourage is when we're, for example, helping clients with template automation, is saying, well, actually, sometimes we've said this. Well, actually, you've sent us these 10 templates. Actually, they all really seem to be doing pretty much the same thing. Do you really need all 10 of these? Quite often, the client will go, we don't really, actually, and therefore you can immediately help the client simplify the business by going, actually, if we simplify and say, so again, from a GC's point of view, you're looking at the risk again, because if everyone's using the same template, and okay, maybe there is you can use different choice of law, for example, in different jurisdictions, but nevertheless the standard template is still the same.
Yes.
Then you know that there isn't the risk of something creeping in, or something that negotiated with a specific client that actually isn't your standard, but maybe has just crept into a precedent. And I think that way you can. It gives you that sort of that certainty, and again that ability to sleep a little bit easier at night, because you know that things are being similar. So I think it's that housekeeping point. A lot of places have this already, but you'd be surprised. Trying to keep up to date, I think, is hard, and businesses get out of control. So we find that as part of the decision that a client will make that they want to move to a CLM system is often part of a larger internal project, which is that they have realized they need to do that housekeeping.
And it's great that you talk about that, because frankly, one of the aspects is we often hear in the market faster time to value. And that absolutely, and that means what people are looking at is saying, yeah, when I sign a contract with you guys and I'm interested in bringing on a solution, whoever it is, a big concern, again, if you're in a GC's seat and you're making that decision, you don't want to be thinking like, oh my God, this is going to take the next 2 years of pulling teeth before we get there. No, you've built up the momentum, you've got people excited about it. Now's the time to kind of move. They want to see some progress. It's, people do have a bit of a shorter attention span now that we're in the social media age, I suppose. But again, and that's important to be able to capitalize on that momentum, keep it going. So in that regard, I've heard also that we have, your team actually came up with a great way of even expediting that and making it like a really quick deployment model to say, let's get our toes into the water as soon as possible. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, so we developed this quick deploy model, really. So in order to do sort of the very basic functionality, the basic configuration, literally within a 2 or 3 week period, in order that lawyers can start using the system really from day one that you've got the software. And I think that because we can sort of build it and we can sort of layer up the levels of complexity. We can do tailored training because there's a lot of functionality within the system, but it all exists at day one. So really whether the client uses it at day one or not is more to do with training and telling people that it exists. And so what we developed was a training program where you can start using the basic functionality. You can start using, say, the collaboration tool, for example, which is a sort of much better way of redlining documents, if you like, than the traditional method. And you can have your documents migrated maybe within 5-6 weeks, so that actually all of your legacy documents are now in one place. Even if some of the more complex, say the workflows or the approvals, DocuSign, those kind of things, maybe they might take a little bit longer, but you've still got people now generating contracts using the new system, collaborating using the new system, and maybe the key approvals, for example, or maybe if there's a key contract type that a sales team might want to use, that they can be made available very, very quickly on the system. Yeah. So actually you get that push. And what we've discovered is that if you then get a couple of maybe the more technology-minded lawyers who want to be the early adopters, and they can start playing in the system, they can start using the system, they can start trialing it with their clients or trialing it internally, that they then become the sort of the cheerleaders, if you like, within the organization to encourage adoption rate.
Yes.
are wider amongst the organization. So by the time we'll then do further training for the sort of broader groups, for the entire legal team, for example, or other parts of the organization that are going to be interacting. And again, the training we offer is very, very tailored to different use cases. So for example, if you have a sales team that are only using a very limited part of the system, for example, in order to generate certain kinds of contracts, so they don't want to understand any of the complexities that the lawyers would want to understand, then they would have very tailored training just for the bit of the system that they're using, as opposed to the more in-depth training that you're giving, for example, to the legal users who are using the collaboration functions, or the artificial intelligence functions, or the risk analysis kind of functionality that we offer, which at the end they might be interesting to the sales guys, but probably aren't. So again, it's that using it in a very tailored, deliberate manner, which we use, and that does seem to encourage adoption and encourage use, and so that people, and again, but you're driving value from day one, because people can see what it's getting, and that way we find that you get the traction, you get the buy-in, and people will then deliver the project and see it through to the end.
Well, with that, thank you. I absolutely want to extend a big thank you to you, Matt, for spending some time chatting with me about lots of different ideas here about legal tech, automation, workflows, AI technologies. Delightful chat. Also wonderful to hear about the implementation process, and frankly, you know what, that maybe you and your team have taken a little bit of that scare away, because you really do handhold customers through that type of process. Look for that if you are if you're watching this video wondering about what should I be doing with my own CLM integration, how do I do digital transformation, chat with us for sure, but take some of what we just talked about and make sure to kind of, when you're doing your due diligence and process of selection, keep those under consideration as well. So, and again, Matt, thank you so much. For our guests, definitely look forward to other GC Masterclass series as they come up, and roughly we're trying to bring them out once every 2 weeks, so that's good news on that side. Again, thanks so much.
Thank you, Charles.